2 o'clock on a Friday can only mean one thing. It means senior producer from NFL Films, Greg Cosell, will be joining us, also co-host of the ESPN NFL Matchup show, where we are anticipating the Monday night affair between the Bills and Patriots to figure prominently in the program. I think Greg tipped us off to that, if I remember right, so I'm not really telling anything that he didn't already mention.
You're not talking out of turn, no.
How are we doing, Greg?
I'm doing great, Chris, and you're right. It's our big game in Part C. That's always our full segment section, and amazingly enough, Bills-Patriots will be our full segment game.
Well, what are your overreaching thoughts about that matchup?
Oh, that's a very open-ended question, Mr. Tasker. You want to narrow that down a little? There's a lot of things to say on this matchup.
Well, listen, both defenses are playing pretty good. Turnovers have driven their success. The Bills on both sides of that coin. When they turn it over, they lose. When they get turnovers, they win. Patriots have not given up a second half point in 4 games. And it's going to be a nasty weather game. This looks like it's going to be like a 9-6 game kind of thing, maybe with these two defenses. But
it's going to be that bad?
Is it supposed to be snow or rain?
They don't know yet.
Don't know.
There is potential for lake effect precipitation, and wind is supposed to be gusting 20 to 30 miles per hour.
Well, that could be interesting for Mac Jones, but because he does not have a big arm, he's not a high velocity thrower. Obviously, Josh is, but the weather could dictate whether you can throw it a lot anyway. But the Patriots are really a run-first offense. They're a physical offense. And I think that's the key here. It's funny, we've been speaking pretty much every week about the Bills defense and the fact that they've evolved into a 100% nickel defense. It'll be very interesting if that's the case again, guys. I mean, I know that's what they've done, but the Patriots are a run-first team. They play with a fullback on a meaningful number of snaps. Do you think there's any chance at all we could see 3 linebackers?
Maybe.
If the weather is that bad, I think that's the only thing that could prompt that. Otherwise, I think they stay in nickel because they do think that much of Taron Johnson.
Interesting, because, obviously the Patriots are they will try to get to the edge on occasion with the pin-pull concept. We saw that with Harris. He scored a touchdown last week. I actually did a piece on that the week prior where I showed that concept. But for the most part, they will attack downhill. And as I said, they will play with a fullback. Here's the pin-pull concept, the touchdown from a week ago that we're looking at right now. But for the most part, with Harris, who's a 225-pound back, and Stevenson, who's probably in the 240 range, they're a physical downhill running football team.
What do you think of the potential storyline that the potential absence of Kyle Duggar presents for the Patriots defense? As you know, that 3 safety nickel package is basically their base defense. If he's not part of the equation, they're going to have to do some shuffling back there because their next best safety is Miles Bryant, who's currently playing slot corner.
Yeah, which he's played mostly this season. He's been a corner for them. They obviously like him because he started off as their 7th DB when they went 7 DBs, and now he's their nickel. Of course, they lost Jones.
Yeah.
That'll be interesting, Chris. I don't know what they'll do because you're right. Big nickel with 3 safeties has essentially been their base defense. And Duggar and Adrian Phillips, to me, are absolute critical components to this defense. Obviously, Phillips will be out there, number 21. Duggar he's on COVID, right?
Yeah, went on there Wednesday, and we were looking. The fastest person to come off the COVID designation list and playing a game this year has been Ben Roethlisberger, 8 days. We're only 6 days away. We're only 6 days away from the game. I mean, I'm not saying it can happen, but we're just going on past knowledge.
Well, I guess then you get into the whole thing about vaccinated. Obviously, if he's not vaccinated, there's no chance. So he must be vaccinated if they're saying there's a chance.
Yeah, but that's the assumption.
But beside that, that's a critical piece. They would have to, I think, do some interesting juggling. I'm trying to look. Obviously, we know that the Bills. We don't know anything right now because weather could play a big factor. If weather is a factor, you could see the Bills line up with Gilliam and play in 21 personnel. You could see them play with 2 tight ends. We don't know how that's going to play out. So, yeah, I think that is a factor. It's just because Bill Belichick's impossible to figure out. I don't have a brilliant answer as to what we might see if Duggar's not there.
What if it does come down where the conditions aren't as big a factor as we anticipate, or that it could be at just a cold night instead of a cold, snowy, rainy, windy night? Would it benefit the Bills, given what the Patriots are able to do up front, to spread them out and go 10 personnel? And then, try and get them to declare who's coming, who's rushing, who's not. I would anticipate the Patriots bringing some pressure to try and get to Josh Allen quick, particularly with Duggar out, because they don't go that deep in their secondary with the ability to go man.
Well, here's what I would think. And again, Steve, it's impossible to know what Bill Belichick's thinking. So all we can do is sort of speculate based on, or what I can do based on just film and how I think it might play out. I think that if it's not a wet night in terms of rain, wind, I think they'll feel that Josh Allen can get the ball through the wind. I mean, unless you're talking 50 or 60 miles an hour, and that's not the case. I think that makes sense to some degree, because the one thing that I feel is I don't think Sean McDermott will go into this game playing scared by any stretch of the imagination. I guarantee they believe they've got a really good team and that they want to be proactive and attack. And keep one thing in mind, since the Patriots lost Jonathan Jones, maybe a month or so ago, they have played far more zone defense than they had prior. They'd been a high percentage man-to-man defense, which has really been Bill Belichick's MO over the last number of years. But they have really played a lot more zone coverage over the last, 3-4 games now. And Steve, your point's a good one. If they go 4 wide, my guess is you would see them line up and play zone coverage. And that might be a way to give Josh Allen more pre-snap information.
And then we know Bill Belichick's history of getting exotic on third down defensively.
Yep.
But for us here in Buffalo, we haven't seen a lot of what they've done with all of the new personnel they have in their front seven. So maybe just spell it out for us, Greg, what they do with Judon and Barmore when he comes on the field in some of those third down packages.
Well, a couple of things I would say. Judon is predominantly an edge player. Not 100%, but predominantly. Barmore is your classic Bill Belichick defensive lineman in that he has alignment versatility. I'm not going to sit here and say he's Richard Seymour, for those who remember Richard Seymour. Yeah. I know you guys do. But Bill Belichick likes defensive linemen that can play multiple positions along the defensive front. Barmore is that player. He's been playing well. Godshaw's been playing well. He's another player that can move along the defensive front. So that's a factor. The one thing I will say is this. What we do know about Bill Belichick is in given situations, down in distance, field location, how the game plays out, he will double and bracket receivers he feels in that situation will be targeted. So I think you will see at times in this game, Diggs targeted or doubled, Beasley targeted or doubled, and believe it or not, Dawson Knox bracketed or doubled. That's my sense.
Yeah, that's always been the Patriots' go-to. Take what you believe that they're going to go to in certain situations, and then do what you can with the rest of it. And how effective have they been up front? They have they like to play physical. I know that. About their run defense, how susceptible have they been to that? How much have teams been able to be, both 50-50 run pass, that kind of thing? How susceptible are they to play action, that kind of thing?
Here's the way I'd answer that, Steve. If you're playing the Bills, and we know from Bill Belichick's history that he's not necessarily worried about yards. You look at last week, the Titans had 2 100-yard rushers. I'm not saying that that's what he wanted, but you can go back, to the Super Bowl against the Bills when Thurman Thomas had 135 yards. And, you obviously remember that. And not that he wanted Thurman to get 135, but he made a decision when he was the Giants DC. You know what? The way they're going to score a lot of points and beat us is with Jim Kelly and the K-Gun. They're not going to beat us giving the ball to Thurman Thomas. And I would think playing the Bills this week, obviously he doesn't want Matt Breida and Singletary to rush for 200 yards, but I would bet that he'd feel very comfortable if the Bills just if Josh Allen turns and hands it off. I think he'd be okay with that, because I think the bigger issue is what the Bills can do in the pass game.
And then speaking of the pass game, Mac Jones has been a highly efficient quarterback, high completion percentage, high percentage throws. We know that, Myers has been his most frequent target, but how do you see the delving out of targets? Is there any pattern to what they do, or do they truly spread it out across the board?
I think they do spread it out, and the way I would describe their passing game is this. They are as good a team in the league at finding specific weaknesses, whether it's individuals, and I'm not just talking about in man-to-man, it could be in zone, at finding individual weaknesses or attacking specific coverages. They're so good at that, and that allows them to play, Chris, to Mac Jones' strength, which is getting the ball out quick with accuracy. That's his game. You want the ball to come out, so they are so good at defining it for him that he can do that. And I think that's what they are. So I'm very curious to see, with Tre'Davious White out, what Sean and Leslie Frazier decide to do from a coverage standpoint. They play more man than people probably think. And will they play man? Because don't forget, you have the run game to deal with too. So I'm very curious to see what Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier do against the Patriots. But Mac Jones, look, I don't want to be cliched here and say, well, he's just a system quarterback, but they are a run-first team, and they really define things for him so well. And by the way, I know the numbers were good last week. I don't think last week was anywhere near his best game of the season.
Yeah, and what do teams attempt to get done versus the Patriots when the ball comes out so quick?
I know.
What is the yin to that yang? If a team is going to do that, what is the best way for a defense to overcome it?
Well, that's where you've got to factor in the run game, Steve, because, you need to stop the run here, particularly in normal down and distance situations. Third down is always a different animal, as you know. But, if you're going to play man coverage, like let's say you say, hey, we want to disrupt their receivers off the ball. And first of all, they'll do motion then to counter that. But let's say that's the way you feel. Well, that can hurt you in the run game, because you can run off your tight end, and you can, on an arc release or a free release, and then the player covering him is out of run support. So it's a tough deal, because the number one thing you have to do is defend the run when you play them. If you can't defend the run, you're going to be in a tough spot.
Special teams looks like a heavyweight battle in this one also. Both units are pretty accomplished. You got two of the top three scoring kickers in the league. They have a very good punt returner in Olszewski. The Bills have ranked high in return average, especially on kick return average. How do you maybe see that part of the game unfolding? Because these are two teams that do a good job of winning the hidden yardage in games.
And I think that's critical. Look, I'm going to be honest. I'm not a special teams guy in terms of film study, but I think this is a game where field position will be absolutely critical. My guess is, with these two defenses, that it's going to be hard to go on long drives consistently. So, if you're starting inside your 20 on a regular basis, that's a tough deal. And one thing about the Bills, and we've talked about this throughout the year, they're capable of big explosive plays in the pass game, obviously, but they have not had as many this year as they had a year ago. This pass game has been much more condensed. Obviously, Josh has completed still a pretty good percentage. I think you're probably up to 65, 66%, which is certainly very good. But they have not really hit big plays the way they did a year ago, Chris. You know that. So it's going to be really hard. It's just hard to go 12, 13, 14 plays in this league.
So when this comes down to it, why are both these clubs, when they get down to it and play good defensively, why are they both able to generate so many turnovers? Do you see a generality that you can point to, or is it just an unpredictable thing that teams work on, and some are better than others?
Yeah, I've always struggled with knowing why that happens, Steve. You played. I'm sure coaches feel that they can coach so that you can create turnovers. I think some do come from tactics. Obviously, if you get pressure on a quarterback and speed him up, could that lead to a turnover? Sure. But, things like tip balls, which, do happen. I don't really know how to categorize those kinds of things as far as forecasting a game. I mean, sure, can you maybe try to create some blitz pressure on 3rd and 9? Last week, the Titans had a really good blitz against Mac Jones. Didn't lead to a turnover. It led to a sack. It was a triple A gap blitz. You don't see triple A gap blitzes very often in the NFL, and Kevin Byard got a sack. So can you try to create turnovers that way? Sure you can. But the fluky ones, I don't know what to make of those.
Right.
So here is the forecast, Greg, at least as it stands right now. Morning rain, then windy with a mix of rain and snow showers in the afternoon. Morning high of 52, temps falling to near 35. Winds southwest at 25 to 35 miles per hour. Chance of rain 90%. Higher wind gusts possible.
Well, if I can remember my high school math, 90% I think is a pretty high number, is it not?
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yes, you are correct, sir.
So I mean, if it's rain, I think everybody would rather play with snow flurries than rain. Wouldn't you agree, Steve?
100%.
Yeah. How important if the game was played in perfect conditions, it was 58 clear and dry, how important would the Bills' running game be? That it may even be more so this week with the conditions the way they are.
Yeah, I mean, I come back to my previous point. I think Bill Belichick would be perfectly happy for Josh Allen to turn around and hand it to Breida or Singletary. I think that he would feel that the pass game is critical. Now, my sense is, here would be my sense of the way Bill Belichick sees Josh Allen right now. My guess is early in his career, he thought he could get him with a lot of post-snap movement because, Josh had to learn a lot of things. I thought last year Josh started to be better in that regard, and I think he's even better in that regard this year. My guess is Bill Belichick would say that the improvement in Josh Allen has been pretty significant. That doesn't mean he's not going to try to do some disguise and late movement because all it takes is a guy getting stuck in the pocket. You guys know this for half a beat, and something bad could happen. And I will say this about Josh. And you know that I think he's the most physically gifted quarterback in the league, but this can't be a game where he tries to do too much when the play is not there. He's going to have to move on to the next play because this is just not that kind of game where, you sort of have to let this game play out the way it plays out and be special within the structure, not try to be special doing something crazy, because that's not going to work out in this game.
Last one we have here, there are some other games on the schedule that are going to impact the AFC playoff race. Chargers, Bengals, Ravens, Steelers, and Broncos, Chiefs. Any one of those kind of pique your interest the most of those three?
I've been really fascinated by what the Bengals have done over the last number of weeks, Chris. They've really run the ball effectively. Joe Mixon is at 30 and 28 carries in each of the last two games. Joe Burrow's not had high volume pass attempts, but yet Joe Burrow is a very cocky quarterback. When he sees one-on-one on the outside, even if the corners are off, he will throw the ball vertically. So the Bengals offense has been very intriguing to me over the last couple of weeks. It's actually a high talented offense with the skill position players. They're a very intriguing team to me, the Bengals.
And the Chargers really can't stop anybody these days, so they might.
No, they have the worst
run
defense in the NFL. You're right.
Can you explain that? I mean, they have some high-end players on that defense, and yet it doesn't bear out in the numbers or their ability to stop people.
Yeah, I haven't studied them enough as individual players to have a great answer for that, but they've basically been the worst run defense in the NFL from the get-go. And I think, I think they give up about 140 yards rushing per game, give or take.
With the defensive coordinator as their head coach.
I know, which is very interesting. But they've been bad all season. So that's clearly a matchup. I actually deal with that matchup in the matchup show. I do a piece on Joe Mixon because I've always liked Joe Mixon, and he's never been talked about much because Cincinnati's never been any good. And now they're good, and people are realizing Joe Mixon's a pretty darn good back.
Right.
All right, Greg, as always, thanks for the time. We appreciate it. We'll catch up with you next week.
All right. I look forward to you guys.
Thanks. Greg.